Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. You may have noticed that I'm not talking over a blank canvas right now, which is what I usually do. So yep, you guessed it, this is going to be a redraw video. The illustration you're currently looking at is from 2022, and of course it's Tokyo Ghoul fan art because I don't think I've ever left my Tokyo Ghoul phase. Even now, I still somehow think of this illustration as a new piece because I felt like 2022 was the first year I sort of hit my digital art stride and started creating a more cohesive style, but it's already been 3 years since I drew this one, so I decided it was time for a redraw. Let's get into it. The reason I chose to do a redraw for this video was that I wanted an excuse to paint in a more textured, messy style like I did in my last video, but I didn't really want to think about composition because I can apparently only think of one thing at a time. So yeah, overpainting something I've already done was a pretty good option. Although I still like the 2022 piece, looking back, I think the colors and background are a bit lacking, so I really wanted to choose a new palette that would be a bit more interesting. I kept the skin pretty gray, but chose some more interesting values and also added light yellows, mid-tone greens, and dark browns into the background. I also made blue the color for the shadows instead of the desaturated purples in the original, because I felt that the blue would make the skin a little bit more interesting. I wish I could tell you that these choices were all formed educatedly, that's not even a word, whatever, formed educatedly because I have background knowledge on color theory, but of course, I do not have background knowledge on color theory, and just chose these colors on vibes. I can tell you that basically everything is warm tones except the blue in the hair and the skin, but that's as far as my knowledge goes. Also, I kept the red eye in there because of course I did. It's Tokyo Ghoul. What else am I gonna do? Of course, I didn't just recolor the 2022 version and leave it at that. Nope, instead I decided to add more elements to the illustration to make it more interesting, and since I already sort of had a theme going in the original, the elements that I chose to add were hands. Oh boy. As an artist, nothing says progress like being able to draw more hands than you previously could, at least as far as I'm concerned. So, you know I had to do it. I kept the original two because I thought their composition was pretty good, and added two more off to the sides. I do end up adding one more hand, which you'll see later in this video, which brings us to an insane total of 5 hands. I'm still thinking of the days where I didn't draw any hands and just hid them behind the body or in pockets. And here I am with 5 hands. Everyone, thank the reference gods because I wouldn't have been able to draw them without their help. Along with the hands, I did a rehaul on the facial features and facial shading because honestly, what the hell were those proportions in the 2022 version? I didn't realize they were that bad until I was making the thumbnail for this video and trying to line up the two halves of the face into something cohesive. And that's when I noticed how weird the original's proportions were. The eyes are just way too big and the hands are also way too big. Although it's still somehow worked out fine in the 2022 version, using that as a base for the redraw made me realize just how weird everything fit together. Of course, maybe that was just my style back then. Not saying that I don't have a sort of anime-esque style now, because I definitely do. You can see where my inspirations are, but at least these days I sort of try to pay a little more attention to how the planes in the face work, and how eyes and nose and whatever else should look in relation to each other, which is something that I didn't quite get in 2022. That being said, I think I may have reached a bit when I decided to repaint the planes of the face, because yeah, I'm not doing it right now on the screen, but you'll see me do it in a second. But because that is not a choice of lighting I am used to, highlighting the cheekbones and nose while keeping everything else in shadow really forced me to make sure everything was at least mildly proportional, and that got super difficult when I started addressing the mouth situation. Usually I don't have any problems drawing mouths, but for some reason every iteration on this one just felt so weird, and I couldn't really tell why despite repositioning and resizing the other facial features so many times. I spent like an hour just like looking at the face like, what is happening here? I need to fix this. I still couldn't get it. I couldn't get it in a way that I liked it. So in the end, I sort of just left it to address at a later point, as you'll see. And that's where the fifth hand comes in. Spoilers. When in doubt, just cover something up. It's so funny that for me, mouths are usually easy to draw and hands are usually hard to draw. But in this case, I'm using a hand to cover up the mouth because I just can't be bothered to draw the mouth. Yeah, 2025, loving it so far. The other thing that I really wanted to work on with this piece was shapes, I suppose. And when I say that, I mean choosing more chunky shapes instead of going in and fixing every line every time I repaint something, because I'm doing it right now on the screen, but it's something that is just so tedious in my style and my process, and I sort of want to eliminate doing that by either going with a more messy style or just refining my shapes into a way that means that I don't have to repaint them a million times. And the part where I really struggled with that was with the hair, because usually I like to draw many strands of hair. First I sort of block in the main shape and then I just sort of render from there. But for some reason, sort of trying to keep those blocks was not working for me in this piece, and like the mouth, I had to redraw the hair a lot of times. I think it was because I really went with this painterly style in the face and the skin, and I just wasn't sure that that sort of texture fit the same way in the hair, and so I sort of wanted to do something different there. But in the end, I thought it just stood out too much as like a smooth texture compared to the skin and the hands and the face, like everything else. So I decided to just scrap it a bunch of times and redo it. I also at one point had to change the colors because I felt that the colors you see now are too similar to the skin, and he does, oh, here I'm going in with that scary mouth. Doesn't it look strange? What's wrong with it? I don't know. Anyways, back to the hair. I ended up making the hair a bit more whiter in the end because this character does have white hair to begin with, and I felt that just having the gray made the definition between the face and the hair just sort of boring, so I really wanted to change that up. Peep the tiny mouth right now, oh my god. I was really struggling here. So in the end, I think I got to a place I wanted with the hair, but oh boy did it take a while, and it's maybe messier than I wanted it to be, but that's just what I'm going with today. I think today was a practice, or this video is a practice in not caring so much about being messy, because that can be a style too. I'm so tired of clean line art and clean lines and clean shading. It takes too long and I'm tired of doing it because I really want to enjoy my art process, and sometimes sitting down and having to render something for a million years because I paint on one layer just is so tedious, and I'd like to sort of refine my style in a way that makes all the process interesting, and adding a lot of textures in, which I do in this piece, I think really helped with that. Now you can see I'm adding in the fifth hand. Once again, thank you reference gods for that. And I'm repositioning things. I still noticed that from the original 2022 version, the hands, especially that hand on the left right now, way too big. I like to proportion the hands. I think of like, if the hand is big enough to cover the entire head, obviously it is way too big. And that is the case with that hand on the left and sort of on the right, those two on the sides of the faces, on the side of the one face that I drew, the one face. So yeah, I definitely had to reposition those, and I get there eventually. But at this point, it was just a lot of proportional mishaps, proportional questionings. I just had to fix a lot. And I'm glad that 3 years later I can look at a drawing and be like, I gotta change this. This ain't right. Instead of just leaving it and being like, oh, it's okay, it's sort of believable. So good for me. I think that's enough of that on my art process for this piece. So now I get to talk about my favorite thing, which I like to talk about at the end of most of my videos, which is book corner time! Woohoo! What book am I reading right now? What fantasy bullshit is in my life at this moment? And let me tell you, so last video, I believe, I talked about Steven Erikson's Dead House Gates. Nope, Memories of Ice, it's the third one. And when I had filmed that video, I was like, oh, this book is so fun. It's great. It's kind of sad. And then I submitted this video, I put it into YouTube, whatever, and I kept reading the book, and it actually had a horrible twist at the end, and it was so sad. And now I'm on the next book in the series, which is called House of Chains. And naturally, it's an entirely different continent, a bunch of different POVs that weren't in the previous book, and the timelines. You're like, what? This is the timeline of the second book, not the fourth book. Whatever. I love shit like this. It's like if Game of Thrones wasn't obsessed with misogyny, and George R.R. Martin, maybe cared to plan out his books before he published them. No shade, but Steven Erikson, if you guys like fantasy and you like really long books with lots of characters and lots of storylines that intertwine, big recommend. I can't wait to keep reading it. It's sad, but also all the characters, even the evil ones, still are I don't want to say fun to read, but compelling characters, so even if I know they're evil, it's still complicated enough that I'm like, oh, this is a good narrative, I like this. And I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm only about 300 pages in. I think it's about 1,000 pages, so who knows, maybe it'll pull a twist like the previous book and I'll get really upset at the end, but for now I'm enjoying it. I'm excited to keep reading. The other thing I wanted to recommend that I'm reading right now is a manga called Witch Hat Atelier, and the art is just so good. I love the art. It's pretty popular now, so I'm sure lots of people know about it, but if you like magic vibes, I think there's some mystery. I've only read 2 volumes, so I'm not that far in, but I think that there's some darker aspects going on in the background that I haven't quite gotten to yet, but oh, the art is so good. I'll throw some panels up right now because I'm so obsessed with how everything is detailed and the shape language, because there's lots of flowy cloaks and hats. The fashion's really good. You gotta read it. Just give it a try. I'm sure you can find the first chapters or something for free somewhere. I read the first volume for free, so you can definitely do it. Witch Hat Atelier and House of Chains by Steven Erikson. Those are my book recommendations for the video. Keep a lookout for my next video because I'll definitely talk about books then too. But here we are with the final piece, phasing in. I added a line to cover the mouth again because I can. And overall, I'm really happy with how it turned out. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.